Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs and their organizations prepare for change and transformation. I'm your host, Tom Hood, the EVP of Business Engagement and Growth at the AICPA SEMA, the largest global body of professional certified accountants in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about the employee experience and why you have to be much more intentional and creative when it comes to your team, especially in this age of the great resignation. Joining me is Kassi Rushing, the owner of her own consulting firm, Kassi Rushing Consulting. She's accredited in public relations, specializes in workplace culture, high performing teams, leadership development, and more. She has a real passion for advancing women leaders and a personal affinity for working moms. She worked with the AICPA on the development of the Leave of Absence as a Retention and Reentry Strategy Toolkit developed by the Women's Initiative Executive Committee. She's also part of our Business Learning Institute and has done some strategic planning actually with me. She's a friend. I've gotten to work with her for quite a while now, and it's an honor and privilege to welcome Kassi to this Future Ready Live. Welcome, Kassi, and say hi to everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom, so much for that introduction and just for the invitation. Always love to get to pontificate the future with you. So this will be fun.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this. So, this obviously I wish we had like a couple hours, but we're trying to do a lot in 20 minutes.
Yes.
So we'll start with this notion of the staffing issue, right? Staffing is a challenge for firms and companies alike. And it's hard to find new employees, which makes keeping those we have imperative. What do we need to get our employees to stay? I think that's what's on everybody's mind.
Yeah. Yes. And so I think, first of all, the way you position that question is really important because we used to just think in terms of how do we keep people from leaving? And now it really is about how do we get them to stay and how do we get them to stay actively engaged and involved? And there's not a check the box list for this, Tom. And that's what's so hard right now is everyone wants the list. Just tell me what to do and I'll go do it. And it is much more complex than that. I believe that our employee experiences going forward have to be highly relationship driven, highly individualized, and we have to be really thoughtful about how are we connecting our people processes and people resources to the actual business case of how we serve clients. And so in the past, yeah, we've gotten it right in pockets, but for the first time on a really grand scale, I think people are starting to look at their people as a true component of their business strategy, not just something they have to, kind of fold in because they're a necessary component of, quote, getting the work done.
Yeah, and this has been, an age-old issue in our profession, right? We like to say that human capital and the human management of human capital for firms and corporations is now becoming essential, right? That's what I think exactly what we're seeing. And this leads to the notion of employee experience, which we've been hearing now every time we've done strat planning in firms, we're hearing it more and more. You're getting both customer experience and employee experience. And I know you have a nice insight about that. Share that right away with us, because I think
For
that's
sure.
a
So
really important one.
I completely believe you can never serve your client better than you serve your people. So to say that another way, you can't have a client experience that exceeds the employee experience. So the companies and the firms that are starting to say, wow, how do we prioritize the employee experience are doing it with the understanding that it is for the benefit of the client and the customer. So those are tied together. We're not separating those. We're not really making a new case for clients to no longer be important. We're saying that to do it, you need your employees and that prioritization of their experience at the top.
I mean, I love the way you say that, and I like to always put things in simple like formulas that people can see.
Yeah.
So I think I'm thinking like, so the EC must be greater than the CE. What's that?
Yeah.
No, the EE, employee experience,
Uh-huh.
has to be greater than the client experience, right?
Right.
That's probably what you're saying. So we've got to start
Right.
thinking differently about that.
Yeah, and it's a hard one because, especially in my accounting friends' world, the client always comes first, right? Like that's been our mantra. The client comes first. The client comes first. And what I want people to start to think about is the client can't come first if our employees aren't here to serve and to collaborate with and to offer insights. How can the client come first in that case?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so what are companies doing in this area that you have some examples or some things to be
Yeah.
thinking about from this idea of creating that truly winning, talent approach
Mhm.
from that employee experience?
So I think to say out loud that the employee experience, again, is not a check the box list of things you have to have. And so the individualized approaches are going to be really important as we move forward. We're seeing out of the research of the great resignation or great reshuffle, whatever wording you want to use for it, that relationships are one of the key reasons that people aren't staying. Now, we're also seeing that, yes, salary is a reason people are going somewhere else, but they're looking at it in the all encompassing context of what am I going to get at another place? And they're getting right now the promise of individualized relationships. Recruiting is becoming very individualized and personal at some of these firms. So what am I seeing across the board? I mean, on the big end, Deloitte said they were adding a billion extra dollars into their people side of the business. So that's covering for them things like practical stuff, workforce, technology is big, removing the hassles of people day-to-day jobs, but it's also things like mental health concierge, and they were doubling their like health and wellness benefits for their employees. So we're seeing some of that. um, but I also think this is a time to think really creatively, not to just try and enhance what is there, but to really try to use some of our skills to say what's missing. And when we look at some of the generational needs and wants, how do we meet those needs and wants right now? And I have to throw this in right here, Tom, because so many times leaders think that they have to sit in a room by themselves and solve this problem. They don't. You've told me time and again that the wisdom of the group is the group. The smartest person in the room is the room. And so leaders have an opportunity to leverage the power of their people in this too. Like, hey, we have a problem, and we know that how we got here isn't going to get us to where we want to go. Help us solve these problems together. I think that's one of the powerful things I'm seeing companies doing, is they're kind of putting the power of let's solve this together back into the employees' hands. But creatively, this tool that we did with the AICPA, it's not a check the box, but it is challenging people to think beyond traditional tools that are already in their toolkit. I've seen firms leverage their EAP to expand it to create mom coaches for working moms. Now, I'm a working mom, so I think about that a lot. But employers should be thinking about working moms a lot. They should be thinking about working parents. We see parents right now under a crunch like we've never experienced before.
Yeah.
And so I think those are places that employers can get ahead. If you can become an innovative employer for parents, parents will do so much for you as our employer, because it's hard. Hard doesn't even begin to cover what we're dealing with right now as parents.
It's true. So, you bring up a great point there, Cassie, that this idea of certainly the pandemic has created stress on the working families, the parents, and the children like we've never seen before. And if you can appeal to that group and help them, and of course, you're speaking right to someone who believes everything you're saying there. That ask your people, right? Too many times I see someone go, well, here's what the survey says they want, so let's just give them that.
Mhm.
And you could kind of miss the whole mark by that
Yeah,
way, right?
right.
It's much better to say, let's get them in a room and go, how can we solve for being the best firm in the world to work for, get
Mhm.
all of our work done exceptionally for our clients, and be a killer place to work, right? That would be the,
Absolutely.
and they'll do that. It's not, everyone thinks if you put them in a room and ask them, they're going to want all these crazy things that we can't give them.
Right.
If you, they know what the constraints are. We gotta have a great business. So what do we do with an and here? Great business and a great place to work, right?
Agree. Trust your people. Like you, most of us have hired great people. So let them be a part of telling us what our next step looks like. It's amazing what a group of empowered people trusted to come up with a solution will come up with.
Yeah, you're spot on that one. Well, speaking of culture, right? This
Mhm.
notion of, and we see it all the time in firms. It's either it's a default culture, or
Mhm.
often we see a culture that becomes a culture by office, by practice,
Mhm.
or by
Yes.
partner. And there's no standard. There's no, it's not across the board. Speak to that a little bit. How do you intentionally design a culture? Where do you
Yeah.
start?
So I believe that a culture by design wins every time.
I like that.
But too many of us do operate in that culture by default mechanism. And it is often, also the leader, it's the leader's company, not the longer standing what are our core values, what do we care about, what it's kind of more of like the default leadership mode of a leader that ends up being a lot of the culture. So when I talk about a culture by design, I'm thinking about a few specific things. I'm thinking about a vision for what you want to become, communicating that, articulating that to your people and your recruits over and over and over. And then putting in mechanisms that bring that culture to life. Disney uses the term operationalize. I like that. Training the culture, however you want to put it, putting the people and the processes and the resources around it then that make it more than this just really great idea. And then last, how do you hold people accountable to your culture? And that's a missing link for a lot of companies is how do we hold them accountable to being who we say we are? But the question was, how do you start? I think the place you start is brutal honesty about where you are because we can't get to there without acknowledging, what the starting line looks like. So I think that's the first step in any culture work is really being honest, warts and all, right? This is where we stand and these are the things that we know we've got to fix or transform to move us forward.
That's awesome. Now, I have to ask this of you because you helped train our team at MACPA
Mhm.
BLI on the importance of feedback, and you have a little different take on that. And obviously, you offer feedback training through our Business Learning
Mhm.
Institute for anyone who's interested. But talk a little bit about the importance of feedback and what you've learned in that notion, and what should we be thinking about there?
Yeah. So I think that most leaders would nod their heads and say, yes, feedback is important to growth. But there's some great research that came out of the Harvard Negotiation Project more than a decade ago, probably now. And it really flipped the script on feedback for me. And it basically said feedback is an umbrella term. It really breaks out into three areas. So that's appreciation, coaching, and evaluation, and that we all need some portion of all three of those to grow in our careers. The and to that book, and the thing that I thought was really truly transforming to my own career was understanding that I don't have to wait on someone to give me feedback. I can go and get the feedback I need from the people I need it from and use that then to grow and really accelerate my growth and development. So we teach individuals how to make that mindset shift and then how to practically go and get that feedback that they need to grow and develop. And that right now I think is such a critical skill
Mhm.
set when we've got such a dispersed workforce. Hybrid teams are our normal. They're not even the next normal, they are normal now. And so in populations where it's so easy to just kind of pay attention to the people in front of you, We need employees who are owning going and getting the feedback that they need. We don't have to rely on the managers or the partners to give it out. We can go get it. And I think that's a mindset shift that more companies need to make.
It's a big one. It's a big
Yeah.
one. And then the other one that stuck out for me was there's also an art to receiving feedback. And I remember you covering that. And that surprised me because I thought, it's more about how do we give it, the uncomfortable thing about
Right.
giving feedback, but receiving it is just as important.
It is. And so what I have found in my career, what the book pointed out and what a lot of other feedback research suggests is that it doesn't matter how skilled a person is at giving feedback. If the person on the other end is not in position to receive it, it's still going to fall on deaf ears. And so, what we have the opportunity to do is help our people build the emotional intelligence and the skill sets that allow them to take that feedback, process it, know when they're being triggered, know when something's hit a rough spot for them and why, and then know how to go and do something with it that makes a difference for their careers and for their clients.
Awesome. This is terrific. Now, before we wrap up, talk a little bit about this toolkit. Like what's it contain? How do people use it?
Yeah. So had the opportunity to work with the Women's Initiative Executive Committee, and they basically came to me with a problem and said, we know we need a tool that can help our firms navigate the exodus of particularly women right now. What could we do? And so we just started kind of brainstorming that. And the result is a toolkit that really walks employers and employees, so it can be used from either set, using this concept of leave. Some people call it a career break, whatever you call it, taking a pause in a career, but with the full intent of re-entering back with your current employer. Because what we've seen over these past 24 months is that leaving or staying have been the only two options. And I think that's a really black and white way to look at this. And with our talent challenges, and especially with even the pipeline into public accounting right now, we can't afford to lose talent to the unknown. So the idea is, yes, priorities compete and often they collide. And what if staying or going wasn't your only option? And so it's, I think, super practical. It gives some ideas and some concepts of how you might implement it at a firm level. But on the individual, it's also going to talk to you about what's your ownership of this and what are the things you need to be thinking about before you go ask for a 3 or 6 or month or a year off to focus on family or mental health or taking care of a loved one. Whatever your need is, it really walks you through all the things you need to be thinking about, because at the end of the day, our business has to be considered, our teams have to be considered, as well as our individual careers. And I think this does a really good job of just laying out some questions and some considerations to start individualized conversations.
Yeah, I've looked at it. It's an amazing resource. We will add a link to it in the chat for this broadcast so that you guys can get a hold of it. But you're right. I love the idea because we see so many people leaving the profession when they leave these jobs permanently. Like we never see them back. So it gives me, optimism that maybe we can reverse a little bit of that trend and back to the mental health and the extremes of this goofy pandemic. We can start to see some relief from that perspective. So it's so timely, and we're so glad you did that with us here at the AICPA.
Yes,
So
my pleasure.
Thank you so much for that. I think with that, any other final thoughts for this broadcast?
Final thought, specific to public accounting, I think that right now we are looking at maybe the biggest opportunity in reinventing our workplace. The flexibility that we really can have because of how we've now pivoted to serve our clients. Yeah, we got to figure out the billable hour. We're probably going to have to throw that out the window, but give people that flexibility, give them that autonomy, give them the opportunity to make a real difference in clients' lives. And I think we can be a place that's really attracting talent rather than just trying to retain it.
Love it. What a great way to wrap up this. So thank you so much, Cassie, for doing all this. You gave us a lot to think about. We'll be putting that link in the chat as we when we broadcast this. So it should be there any minute now. And follow her on LinkedIn at Kassi Rushing.
Mhm.
And Instagram, I love this one. It's at Moms Make Great Leaders, all one word.
Yes.
Moms Make Great Leaders. Follow her on Instagram. And thank you for joining us today. And don't miss our other Future Ready Live sessions every first and third Tuesday of the month. So noon Eastern. And we'll see you there. Hashtag Future Ready Live. Thank you again, Kassi Rushing.